Can a therapist refuse to see a patient who has been referred by their doctor? Yes, that's an easy one. You already know from what I've said that I'm going to be answering one question for every subscriber. And if you know me personally or watching up these videos, I can take a 5 second or 2 second answer and turn it into 20 minutes. So I might start with more steam than I end with. We're 7.5 minutes in on question two. I can't keep that. We're going to be on here for 10 hours if I keep that pace, but we'll keep it for now. Can a therapist refuse to see a patient who has been referred by their doctor? Yeah, so as a therapist, especially private practice therapists, you can decline anyone. Um, the issue comes if you're it comes down more to civil rights issues. You can't just discriminate from a pure discrimination standpoint, which is also kind of hard. Like one example is, you can't turn someone away if they're gay, right? That's a civil rights issue. But what if you feel like you're not an expert in LGBTQ plus issues, and they're coming in presenting with that, where they want to work through maybe gender or sexuality? I mean, I would say that's maybe a form of discrimination, but not bad. That could be, I'm not equipped for this. I can sit with you, but I know therapists that are better at this, and I think that's okay for therapists to do if they want to. So that's a uh, hard line sometimes to notice, what's pure discrimination versus just professional competency. This is where it's good to have consultation teams and supervision. But yeah, if a doctor, I'll use myself as an example. If a doctor recommends one of their patients come to see me, I have no obligation to see them. There's maybe some spaces where that's not true if there's a clear partnership between them, like in the same clinic. We're not really supposed to have like referral partnerships. That's considered unethical. But yeah, there's maybe some cases where it's in-house and it's supposed to work that way, but from a private practice standpoint, you can absolutely turn people away. There's definitely kind and unkind ways to do that, but you can. And I'll reiterate too, not all these are going to be therapy related. We're going to start there, but they can go any direction. Question three. I want to leave therapy because I don't feel like I'm gaining enough for it to be worth my money, but I just like my therapist too much and can't imagine going on without her. What should I do? Okay, there's a couple statements in there. I want to leave therapy because I don't feel like I'm gaining enough for it to be worth my money. That's a pretty good sign for most things. If it doesn't feel worth its value, why are we still engaging in it? Um, there must be something else there, right? And in this case, yes, because they go on to say, but I just like my therapist too much and I can't imagine going on without her. So that's your reason why you're doing it. And so technically it is valuable. I don't feel like I'm gaining enough for it to be worth my money. I don't know. It sounds like you are in some sense because of the relationship. Now, therapists are not designed to build a friendship with you. I think it's okay at times if we're the only friendly connection you have to continue therapy while we're helping a client build community and friendships. That's okay. The languaging there is a little bit, I would question the languaging if I was in person with this person of, I can't imagine going on without her. That's a bit coded for potential like self-harm or suicidal thoughts. They might just be implying I I don't want to, like, the thought of continuing my regular life without them doesn't make sense, but that language would be a slight alarm language for me as a therapist to press into more. Um, the "what should I do" piece, I think most of you here will know that I can't tell anyone what they should do as a therapist. However, my recommendation would be to, and you'll probably hear this a lot with therapy related questions, is talk to your therapist about it and bring it up to say, my hope is that they can say this to the therapist. I want to discontinue therapy, but I don't want to end the relationship, which I feel like is the core of this. I don't need the therapy, but I feel like I need a relationship. Um, so I also wonder if the therapist has overly been too much of a friend, and not in a like bad way. We should have a healthy relationship, but there's a friendliness line where we don't want our clients to think we're their friends. We want them to know that they are cared for, and that even maybe outside therapy, we would have potentially been friends. But this is a professional dynamic with hopefully some affection and care in it. So, um, yeah, I would recommend talking to the therapist if at all possible. And another option, if this feels difficult, is to just reduce sessions. So it's also probably not healthy to say, hey, you should just cut it off right away. Because if this is a crutch, then that's important to potentially taper. So that would be one option if you're going weekly. Can you go every other week? Can you shift every 3 weeks or monthly? Is that an option? But it does sound like building relationships outside of that while you slowly pull away from this one could be a healthy transition. Man, these are kind of hard to do when you're the only one talking the whole time. But only 99 more to go. I need to keep a live footage of how many, what are they called, subscribers I have. We have at least 102. So, next question. Question 4. How many therapists can I talk to at the same time? This is an ethical question, and it's really a good one. I got asked this question in the last week, or a form of it. There's two answers. One answer is one therapist. The other answer is depends on what you're doing. So, if you come to see me and you want to work on, let's say, trauma, we're going to focus on trauma, and that's the goal. And you're also seeing a trauma therapist, and we're both focusing on the same trauma. And you tell me that, I'm going to refuse service. I'm going to say you have to pick between me and or the other therapist. The reason is if I'm working through trauma and I might have a certain methodology and approach that I take, and I'm asking you to pull things up and I'm having us go through things in a certain order, in a certain style, and you have another trauma therapist doing it their way, we're working on the same thing. Look at it this way. Let's say you're remodeling a kitchen and you bring in one specialist, one contractor, and they're doing work Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And then on Thursday, Friday, you have another specialist come in and do their work. And you don't want two different kitchens, but you want them to just, hey, these people can only work Monday through Wednesday. I just want you to come in and keep working on our kitchen Thursday and Friday, but you have no communication. So neither of them have any input on what's going on. The chances of that kitchen ending well, it's going to be a mix and people's directions and approach are going to be different and it's not going to work. It's the same here. And even with therapist communication, because you might say, well, those two therapists could communicate, we're still overlapping work. So where I would be okay with this potentially, and this isn't usually my style, but those two therapists could partner up and do co-therapy together. I'm a fan of co-therapy. Uh, Typically not with therapists I don't know well, like on a personal and professional level. That's an option. The other option is, and I have done this, is one therapist does trauma work and the other therapist does a separate, completely separate type of therapy. So I've done this before where people needed really intense trauma work, but they also had a lot going on in their day to day. And there just wasn't time in a session to do both. Um, and they needed the specialist for that. And then they had a personal personality connection that was better with different therapists potentially, whether that was me or the other person, because I've done this a couple times. And that therapist works on some of the day to day, and they are aware of the other trauma work happening. And so they don't go into that. You will have some therapists tell you that that's still not allowed. It technically is allowed. It's just something that you have to be really careful with. It's not a bad idea to get extra consent signed and permissions, but generally speaking, I would lean towards one. And if you're seeing two, make sure it's explicitly different, that you and both therapists can explicitly state the difference of those two appointments and that all three parties know that this is happening. So this is a good question. And it does come up more than I think some people would think. Uh, but I've seen it multiple times. So, okay. Uh, there's a funny Quora page called Therapists Exposed. And it's a great place to lurk and just see what clients don't like about therapists and try to learn from that. Um, the common one is money. And that's what this question is. Question 5. Do you think, oh, okay, I see you, John. Good to see you. All right. So, the money question. Do you think that therapists are worth, on average, $150 per session? This is a complex one. This is a great 50-hour discussion on what therapists should charge. I told you before, it depends is gonna be an answer that is frequent, but it does depend, and a lot of this depends on the definition of value. So, um, what is worth it to you? So, the example that I use with people is if I told you that there's a 5-bedroom house, perfect condition, nothing's wrong with it. I'm gonna sell it to you for $50,000. That's expensive in terms of just money, right? But you would say, potentially, what's the catch? 5-bedroom, it's perfect condition, no repairs, it's ready to go. Why is it only 50,000? Especially in our market nowadays. You'd be thinking it should be at least 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, $800,000. So you actually have a red flag potentially as to why is this only 50,000? But if I told you I have this amazing, perfect condition, it's ready to go, it's a t-shirt and it's $1,000. You're like, why? What could possibly make a t-shirt worth $1,000? So the value is attached to perception and subjectivity of what we're referring to. And this is, I really believe this is what's happening a lot with therapy, is people are just thinking price tag. They are not connecting it to what's actually happening, what they're actually paying for. Um, that is not everyone, but a lot of people, when you ask them, well, what do you think you're paying for? They'll just kind of say therapy. I want therapy. I want mental health help. I think one of the biggest detriments in the therapy community is our current inability to effectively communicate what we do to the broader world. And there's a lot of people that say it's worth twice as much as this person asked, and some people that don't think it's worth a fraction of that. So this is just perception. And this is a separate question than people saying it costs so much I can't afford it. That's different. That's not connected with worth. At least the phrasing of this question is, do you think therapists are worth on average 150 an hour? And I think they can be. So therapists need a minimum of 6 years of college. There's pretty much no faster way to do it unless you start maybe your undergrad. That's like with a lot of college credits, but you need the equivalent of 6 years. 4-year undergrad. A lot of people take 5 years now um, to do undergrad degrees. Your post-grad degree, your master's is going to be at least 2 years, minus 23 months. A lot of them are 3 years. If they go on to be psychologists um, or PhDs in their therapy field, mental health field, that's another. That's not required though, so I'm going to exclude that. If they want to be um, licensed at all, you do 6 years of school ish, and then you spend thousands of dollars on all the training. You have to do practicum work. It's hard to work and put yourself through. A lot of people come out with debt. Most of them do. The ones who don't are typically people who are doing a second career or their spouse is successful enough to pay their way through. And then once you graduate, you have to take licensing exams. You have to pay licensing fees to the state. You have to do that every 2 years in most cases. You have to, if you're in private practice, rent office space. You have to pay to run a business, potentially pay for a business license. You have to keep liability insurance. You have to spend money on everything that the government can possibly find a way to make you spend money on just to be allowed to do your job. And then from there, you have to figure out what you're going to charge. And if you're an agency, you have to do pretty much everything I just said, minus running your own business. So, which is also why people in private practice cost more than agency because they're paying to run their own business. And they're building their practice in a way that's more congruent typically with what they want to do. Not always. A lot of people in agency love it and it's congruent. They just don't get to construct it the same way. So it can totally be worth it. And then after all of that, we get into whether or not the therapist is good at their job. Some therapists are bad at their job. I'm a firm believer that currently our education system is putting too many therapists out in the field. The requirements to become a therapist are mostly financial. Actually, in my opinion, the biggest determining factor of if you're going to be able to be a therapist is if you can find the resources to get through school. I've seen a couple people who I personally believe are in no mental position and are not healthy at all, in terms of doing this job and shouldn't be doing it. I think there needs to be a lot less people getting accepted into school, and there should be um, a lot more people being removed from programs. Put it that way. There's an oversaturation of people who are just okay at the job or flat out shouldn't be doing it. And in a field that you do behind closed doors in private, it's very hard to have oversight on if people are doing it properly. And you mix that with, I'm getting on a tangent. Some are worth it, some are not. Um, and then a lot of them have sliding scales where they charge less. But some therapists, no, it makes no sense to pay them 150. Other therapists, um, they're giving their time away like charity to charge 150. So the question you have to ask yourself is, if I'm paying $150 for therapy, am I getting $150 back of the life that I want? And then, yeah, maybe it is. The things that I will just throw money at are a reflection of what I value. So, if you have to be talked into it, you probably don't value it. I understand if you have to be questioning, like, I want to value it, but things like I'm saying, is it a good therapist or not? I get that. It can be hard to find the right one, but yeah, man, it can absolutely be worth the price with the right person.